Forgive me, I couldn't get the camera to work, but let's start with some history behind the war on drugs. The U.S. has always played a big role in fighting drug trafficking, and especially in Latin America. Countries like Colombia and Mexico were heavily involved because they're major sources of the drugs like cocaine and heroin. And the U.S. government sent support, like sometimes military help, to combat these drug cartels that distribute these things, um, so they can prevent violence and instability. This connection between drugs and war goes beyond just Latin America. In Afghanistan, during the global war on terror, the opium trade actually exploded. Even though the U.S. was there to fight terrorism, obviously, with a war going on, the conditions of the war made it easier for opium production to grow. And what we see here is a complex link between war zones and drug markets. And it's not just about fighting crime, it's about how war can sometimes make these drug problems worse. And down here in the left hand corner, we can see some of the countries in Latin America that are involved. And then over here on the right, poppy plants that are in Afghanistan can be used to make opium. And that field kind of represents how war and drugs can cross paths. Now let's talk about the bigger picture here, and the main takeaway. So a lot of times we hear that drug laws are meant to protect public health and keep people safe. And while that's part of it, definitely, there's more to the story. And drug policies have often been tied to racial, political, and economic goals, as we've learned over the past couple months. And that means some laws were used to control certain groups, especially people of color or those living in poverty. For example, crack cocaine and powder cocaine are basically the same drug, but crack, which was more common in poor black communities, had way harsher punishments that came along with being found with it. So it wasn't always about safety. Sometimes it was about who had power and who didn't. In the picture down below, you can see that reflected here. Someone in jail facing the justice system with the scales of justice tilted. And this image really reminds us how laws can be unfair even if they seem neutral on the surface. And, you might ask yourself the big takeaway. The war on drugs really wasn't just about stopping drugs. It was about politics, race, and control.